Hello, welcome to Hope Matters, Mount Olive Lutheran Church in Santa Monica's weekly program where we talk to interesting people about the theme of hope. I'm Pastor Shafer, the senior pastor of Mount Olive, and we're interested in talking to people about hope because we believe that hope matters and we believe we have a God of hope. Our guest today is a dear friend of mine, Beth Lewis, the recently retired executive of the Evangelical Lutheran Church America's publishing house. It's known by a number of names, 1517 Media, Spark House, Augsburg Fortress, and people know it by all those names in our church and around outside of our church. But Beth is hardly having a life of leisure in retirement. So Beth, welcome to our program. We're so glad you could be with us.
Thanks, Eric. Delighted to be with you.
Tell us a little bit about what retirement life is like for you.
Yes, my husband and I have conversations about retirement now and again. We are equally guilty of failing. I am currently doing a lot of consulting, so working with mostly publishing houses, doing consulting on strategic planning, visioning, marketing, those kinds of things. And my husband, Rick Rouse, a semi-retired Lutheran pastor, and I just finished a 10-month consultation with a Lutheran congregation on visioning and strategic planning. He was coming at it from the pastor view, and I was coming at it from more of a business executive view. And most recently, as of June 1st, I've taken on the part-time role of executive director for a small to mid-sized trade association, the PCPA, Protestant Church Publishers Association. So it's the publishing companies of the various denominations.
Wow, and I think you told me that it's a very large table, from the conservative denominations to the liberal ones.
It is. We have about 35 member companies, and then all of their staff are by virtue of that members. And we have about a dozen adjunct members who are basically vendors to the publishing industry and hold a couple of conferences per year. It's everything from, the smallest, most conservative denominations to the most progressive. And some of the publishing ministries have one or two staff and some have multiple hundreds. So it's quite a range.
Wow, that's cool. I want to point out to our viewers something that Beth wouldn't say herself, but when she took over our Lutheran Church's publishing house, then called Augsburg Fortress, it was bankrupt. And when she left, it was breaking even, or maybe even making a little money. And that is pretty amazing. Beth, you've heard me say this too many times, but I hope you don't mind again. I don't think the publishing house had ever made money or broken even before Beth took office. And so that made it even more amazing that Beth pulled off, some major changes to make the place both profitable and practical and helpful to the church. And that you did, Beth, for sure.
Well, thank you. As you well know, Eric, no leader does it alone. And I was so blessed to have just a superb team of longtime employees, but then hiring in some executives especially who were such catalysts for innovation and change.
Well, a smart boss hires good people, right? That's good. And then Beth and I got to know each other because Beth would come to meetings in Chicago when I was working for the presiding bishop, and Beth was one of the units of the church that wasn't in Chicago, it was in Minneapolis, and Beth would come and she would have dinner at Chris's in my home, or we go out to dinner almost every time.
Many times.
We became very close, and we got to meet this guy, Rick, that she was starting to date, and gave our opinion, which was thumbs up, fortunately. And that's how many years of marriage now, Beth?
14.
Ooh, that's hard to believe.
I know. Time flies when you're having fun.
Yeah, we were there, and all that good stuff. So, that's great. Well, you and I were talking before we started recording about some of the things that give you hope, and I think this is a natural place to talk about that. You named at least 3. I'm sure we'll think of others. So, Beth, what does give you hope in these times, in the church, in society, in the world?
Well, we were just talking about the PCPA and my work there, and I have to say that being connected to an ecumenical community through that work gives me hope. If we had asked pastors in, say February, gee, what would it take to do online church? And could you offer Bible studies? How about youth confirmation classes online? Could you do that? I think most of them, it's safe to say, would have said, well, I need to study that. Let's put a task force together and spend 6 months and really examine the pros and cons and what it would cost and how would we do that. And 6 months would have passed. And they would have probably come to the conclusion that, well, it's pretty hard to do. And I'm not sure it's worth the investment. I'm not sure people would sign up. Well, in February, that's what they might have said. But in March, that's what they had to do. And they had to do it on a dime. And they did. And Rick and I attend at least 2 worship services every Sunday and sometimes more at varying congregations. And we watch them get better and better and better at this. And that gives me hope. This, not the technology itself, but the adaptability, that sense that we can change. We don't have to do things the way we've done it for the last at least 500 years. And we can do things in ways that are dynamic and fresh, but still faithful. And that gives me hope.
That's great. And yeah, if we can take a side conversation about that for a minute, you've seen this too in other places. The numbers are phenomenal. Mm-hmm. We were averaging at Mount Olive before COVID, 135 per weekend, which for a congregation of 235 is amazing. And and we were proud of that. We're averaging closer to 300 now. I mean, the numbers are just, and I'm not alone in that. I mean, we're doing perhaps better than others, and we have a product that you've seen that even one synod is using as an example for their synod. But, many of us are having numbers. Our friends are watching around the country. Okay, that's some, but that's not, the Beth Lewis is watching Mount Olive aren't that many. I mean, there are some.
And not every week.
Yeah, not every week. But the fact that we have people checking in from around the country and around the world. So the question is, and this is another program that we should talk about because you and I like to talk about communication. The question is, what do we do when we get back? Well, we know what we have to do.
Yeah.
Now, I have shut-in members who are saying, now, Pastor, you're not going to stop this. Right. But I mean, more than the shut-ins, we're going to have, you'll appreciate this. So one of our key leaders is thinking of moving. Mm-hmm. And so he said to me, well, where I'm moving, they're not worshiping. So why wouldn't I stay a member of Mount Olive? Right. And, okay. So I think that's it. Membership is going to have to be redefined, isn't it?
Yes. Yes. And, it makes me think of a couple of things. One is when Rick and I were just finishing up that consulting on strategic planning and visioning for a large congregation, we did a survey because we started it last fall, so it was in-person worship and other events, but we ended it in this time of the pandemic with everything online. So one of our survey questions of all the members was, do we go back to in-person everything? Do we keep the online, or do we do both? And it was a resounding both in terms of the answer.
Well, I have people tell me all the time, oh, Pastor, I really miss worship. But it's kind of nice to watch it in my pajamas. and these aren't lazy. These are people who are also sending in their income.
Yes.
More, and many of them more than they were sending in before, which is, how about that? I mean, I think but you and I are of the same ilk, and the glass is always half full, not half empty. It's definitely 2/3 full in this crisis, and we'll see. But we were talking about some other things that give you hope.
Yeah, well, related to this is the work I'm doing through PCPA with denominational publishers, because like the congregations that they serve, they are also being quite adaptable in terms of how they deliver content to serve God's people through congregations or seminaries or other ministries. And I'm so kind of astonished that I've actually been invited in to do consulting with, now I'm on my 4th publishing company that is about strategic planning and visioning. So these are folks who are not looking in the rearview mirror. They're looking forward and planning, actively planning. They know that things are going to be different and they're not quite sure how or what, but we know that they are. And so they're really being intentional about that. And that also gives me hope for the future, because denominational publishing is a tough business and ministry to be in, and was before the pandemic hit.
Yeah.
So I'm very hopeful at those folks and how they're thinking about their work.
Another side conversation is, you look at how they're doing. Have they seen an uptick of people buying books because people have time?
It's mixed. There is some uptick in buying books, and particularly ebooks and audiobooks. But one of the big challenges for the denominational publishers is most of them, their bread and butter comes from curricula for children's Sunday school and confirmation and adult Bible study. And those sales have just dropped like a rock. So these are challenging financial times for these publishing companies. So if I put in a pitch, it would be, if you love your denominational publishing company, go buy a book or 3 direct, because that will help them. But
I used to hear you say this when you were Augsburg Fortress, that you can buy our books on Amazon, but if you buy them from us, we actually make a little more.
A lot more. So,
although nothing wrong with buying on Amazon. I want the
that's
book.
right. We'll get a sale, however we get it, right? As I think about those publishing companies too, another thing that gives me hope is the ways I hear them talking about extending their reach beyond their traditional stakeholders, their traditional customer group, if you will. They're thinking about it certainly in terms of ecumenical and secular folks who might never have picked up a faith-based resource in the past, but people are looking for hope, and they're looking for something bigger than themselves. So I think there's some opportunities. I was on a call actually earlier today with some folks who were talking very intentionally about how to reach and how to give voice to marginalized people, to people whose skins are black and brown, to people who maybe never darkened the door or haven't for a long time of a church, perhaps because they were hurt by the church, but that they are looking for something rich and spiritual, something to give them hope. And so these companies are looking at how they can leverage that opportunity, but also serve those people in new and different ways. I think that as tragic as all of the things around the police and people of color have, all the horrible stories that people have heard, it seems like there's finally in our country a realization of the systemic racism and a genuine desire to change things. I know it will not be a straight path, but it feels different this time when we say Black Lives Matter than it did 2 years ago or 4 years ago. You were at our wedding, so you know that Rick and I were married at Calvary Lutheran Church in South Minneapolis. I still have lots of friends there. That congregation is 1 block from where George Floyd was murdered.
Wow.
And so I have seen my friends from that congregation and many other congregations of various denominations in South Minneapolis really step up to provide nurture and support in practical ways like bottled water and diapers to people coming to mourn his death, and in spiritual ways of offering a hand on a shoulder or a prayer. And so all of those actions of these good people really provide me with hope.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. And in a more personal way, what gets you up in the morning? I mean, and it's it'd be, you're technically retired and you're busy, so you could turn over. What
Yeah.
gets you up in the morning, Beth?
I do love this
Besides
work.
the new dog. I mean,
Yeah, the 1-year-old puppy, he will get us up if we aren't getting up fast enough. And his joyfulness, as puppies are, it does keep us going. But it's also it's my nature to be a glass half full, as you say, person. I do love the quieter rhythm of life in semi-retirement. That yes, if I have a 7:30 a.m. conference call, I'm up and ready to go and on it. But there are days that I don't have to do that, and Rick and I can enjoy a leisurely breakfast together, and I'll have another cup of coffee and maybe even read something a bit. And so that pace is lovely to have, and I feel very fortunate. We also count our blessings for our kids and our grandkids. As you know, we moved to the Seattle area 2 years ago, and so it affords us the opportunity to spend time with some of our kids and grandkids here. And everybody's in masks and we're outside a lot, but that's a joy, and we don't take that lightly.
right. Well, this has been a rich conversation, Beth. Thank you. Is there anything we forgot to talk about? We should talk about.
I can't.
Tell us a little bit about the Church Anew program that you're involved
Church Anew, that's a great sign of hope as well. It's coming out of St. Andrew Lutheran Church in Eden Prairie, Minnesota. So I dial in via Zoom for our meetings. I was privileged to be asked to be on their executive board of advisors. And it's started a couple of years ago as a conference event. So in-person conferences with keynote speakers, Rosella D. White and Brian McLaren and others. In fact, we have Rob Bell scheduled to be on and he was supposed to be with us in May of 2020. And as you might imagine, that got bumped out to August and now is bumped to May of 2021. But people are so excited about the work that's being done with online video-based speakers. And the most exciting thing is a blog that we launched in the midst of the pandemic that is posts of, 4 or 5 a week. And some amazing names, people like Walter Brueggemann and Eric Barreto and Angela Denker and so forth, but also a number of new voices, voices from varying communities, from marginalized places, a lot of people of color, a lot of young voices, as well as sages. So it's very exciting. I would really recommend it. It's churchanew.org if folks are interested in finding that blog or learning about the conferences.
Wonderful. That's an easy one to remember, churchanew.org. I think we don't have to spell that on the screen. I think people can figure that out. So yeah, I know you've been involved in that, and I've been reading the blog posts by, as you say, some people that are famous, at least in church circles, and some that I don't even know, but have important things to say to us. So thank you for that. And thank you for being with us, Beth. It's always good to be with you and to see you in this way. And it's just been it's just a pleasure, and to be able to interview both you and your husband Rick Rouse the same week. For our viewers, they're going to appear probably one week and one the other, so you'll have to wait and see who's first. And but the best interview will be on our YouTube site, hopefully forever after that. So, all right, this is Hope Matters, a production of Mount Olive Lutheran Church here in Santa Monica, California, where we talk to interesting people about hope, because we believe we have a God of hope, and we believe hope matters. This is Pastor Eric Shafer. Thanks to Beth Lewis, and thanks you all for joining us today.
Thanks, Eric.